everyone that I tell that I'm graduating this spring, they say, oh, great. Well, what are you doing? What are you going to do? That's the big question, right? And what is kind of implied in that is like, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do with your degree? That's kind of a scary question. Every time I get that, I'm like, ooh, I want to go hide in a hole or something. But that's not a question that's just reserved for seniors. At least you've probably asked that at some point, right? What am I going to do when I'm done? What am I going to do this summer? Am I going to work? Am I going to go home and serve at my church? Am I going to, I don't know, go do something fun for the summer? What are you going to do? It's, I think, in these moments when we're kind of at the edge of something, the end of something, looking to the next step, that we really begin to ask kind of the bigger question, like, where am I headed? What's going on? So I hope that just by this morning, sharing my story with you, that we can just kind of come to a better place together about what that looks like and how to approach that question. So my story, as a junior in high school, I started kind of realizing my own faith again, asking the harder questions like, why do we do what we do? Why do I go to church? What's the point of this? I'm a pastor's kid, and so I went to church a lot, and I was really struggling with that. It's like, why do I do this? I was sitting in history class one day, and what I'd been telling myself is, this isn't, the religious part of this is not the answer, the doing part of it. There's more to it than that. I can't quite put my finger on it. And I was sitting in history class, my history professor said, Christians believe that it's not about a religion, that it's about a relationship. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. This blew my mind. My history professor, like, who would have thought? I'm sitting in, this is not a Christian school, it is a public school. He just kind of like dropped that in my lap, and I've held on to that for a long time. So as I was kind of holding that, what does it mean to be in relationship with God? That summer, I went on a mission trip to Venezuela with the church that I was attending. The church that my dad was a pastor at was a long ways away, so I was a part of a youth group that was local, and this church invited me to go with them to Venezuela. And it was on this trip that I experienced this spiritual realm in a way that I never have before. I think I experienced the reality of the spiritual life in ways that I don't think that I would ever see in America. In Venezuela, there's much more weight put into the spiritual realm than there is here. Often here, it doesn't look like that. And so while I was there, prayer had such a powerful effect on our team, on the people that we were ministering to the people, that we were with, the missionaries that were there. We built a church with them. The people that were on the team with me, we shared our life stories together. These are people who were 20s, 30s, and their 50s, and just sharing really openly and honestly with their struggles, something that I'd never experienced before. And I came back just sold out. I felt like this is what the church is supposed to be about. It's about sharing with each other our lives and pursuing a mission together. So as I stepped into college, going on mission trips and pursuing missionary life was something that I was all about. two summers later, I went to Russia with the same church. Every spring break, the school that I went to, George Fox up in Oregon, was a Christian school. They would take students on a mission trip for spring break and even during the Christmas break. So I went to San Francisco and slept on a bus for a week and fed homeless people. I went to Salt Lake City and talked to the Mormons there. Went to a Christian camp one spring break to help them prepare for the summertime. They had us clear this brush on a hillside. Turned out it was poison oak, so we got poison oak for Jesus. That was pretty cool. I took every opportunity that I could. I got my minor in Christian ministries with an emphasis in missions, so I was certain that this was going to be a part of my near future. Come my senior year, I start asking, what am I going to do with my life? The spring semester rolls around right about this time, and a friend came to me and said, I have this opportunity to go to the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's if you're not familiar with that, it's in the very heart of Africa, and they said that we would be there for 9 months teaching Christian leaders, and that she was inviting me to go with this organization. And I prayed about it, thought really hard about it. I knew that this was not typically a safe place to be, but I really wanted to go, and I felt like God might be calling me to go. So I told my friend, I said, yeah, let's do this, let's go. A few days later, the organization came back and said, sorry, guys, we just feel like the Democratic Republic of Congo is just too unsafe. The government isn't stable enough. We don't feel comfortable sending you guys over. And I just thought, man, like, what? This doesn't make any sense to me. God, I really wanted to do this. I thought you wanted me to do this. And what have you kind of been leading me towards? Where have you been pushing me? But there's a part of this process that I hadn't really come to grips with. I think there's a part of me that felt like this was the way that I was going to be valuable in God's kingdom, right? That by moving across the world and by doing something radical, that's what really showed my commitment to Christ. That somehow sacrificing in this particular way was the way that I show God that I love him, that I'm giving my whole life. I think that I thought that this was more valuable than, say, just getting a job at a coffee shop down the street. And I think a lot of you might agree. Like, maybe going and sharing the gospel across the world sounds a lot more impactful and a lot more meaningful than it does to make a mocha for someone at 7 a.m., right? I think, and I can't tell you where this comes from, because I'm admittedly not an expert on work and the ways that we have theology about work, but I know that there's a hierarchy that exists in a lot of our minds, I would imagine, that the most meaningful jobs that we might think of in the kingdom of God might start with missionary, right? At the top, you can't get more committed, more meaningful, more impactful than being a missionary in another country, right? Maybe after that, there's a pastor. Maybe after that, there's a youth pastor. Maybe if you work in a nonprofit that's serving the homeless, there's like some sort of hierarchy in there. And then after that, there's all the other kinds of work, right? But even that might look really specific. Maybe to you, it looks like there's doctors and lawyers, or not lawyers, depending on how you feel about that. Meaningful work, educated work, and then maybe it's below that. There's, I don't know, teachers or coaches, or maybe below that it's maintenance people, Maybe below that it's garbage collector, right? And maybe this isn't something that we consciously think, and I bet we might even, well, I can tell you personally, I would deny it. I'd be like, I don't think that. But would I become a garbage collector? Probably not. Not that we all need to be garbage collectors. Dorothy Sayers did a lot of her ministry in the 40s and 50s. She said this. She said, "No crooked table legs or ill-fitting drawers ever came out of the carpenter shop at Nazareth. Nor if they did, could anyone believe that they were made by the same hand that made heaven and earth. No piety in the worker will compensate for work that is not true to itself, for any work that is untrue to its own technique is a living lie." Very strong words. I like the way that Martin Luther put it, right? The instigator of the Protestant Reformation. Says, "The work of monks and priests, however holy and arduous they may be, do not differ one whit in the sight of God from the works of the rustic laborer in the field, of the woman going about her household tasks. All works are measured before God by faith alone." Just like Martin Luther to talk about by faith alone, but I think he's onto something here. In Paul, in 1 Corinthians 12. Now, a lot of us are very familiar with 1 Corinthians, right? It's this image of the church being the body, and rightly so, is often used as this image of unity. What does it mean to be united as believers? But I want us to look at something else as well. He says, "The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I don't need you,' and the head cannot say to the feet, 'I don't need you.' On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it." I think there's this myth that, alongside of all of this, I think there's this myth that of this impact to distance ratio, right? The farther away that I go, the more that I give up for the sake of the kingdom. That makes it so much more valuable, right? If I go to the deepest part of Africa, that is somehow more valuable to God and more honoring to Him than it is if I move across the country. And maybe moving across the country is more valuable to God than if I stay here. I moved away for college. I went up to Oregon, and I'm from Southern California. I went up to Oregon for college, and so I got to live in a different part of the country. It's still the West Coast, but felt pretty different. And every time I meet someone that has lived in the same town their entire life and has never left that area of the country, I'm surprised. And there's a part of me that thinks like, wow, how do you do that? And even if this rarely happens anymore, but if you've ever met someone who is pursuing the same kind of work that their parents are doing or their parents have done, that's even more amazing. To me, I'm shocked. I'm like, wow, well, have you really thought about this? Have you really considered other options? And maybe those are good questions to be asking, but that also reveals something in my own life, in my own heart, that says, well, maybe it's more valuable to have different kinds of experiences. I think some of this is a cultural bias, honestly, that our American society, our culture, values the pioneer. They value achievement, right? Pursuing something that is bigger and beyond what we already have. Be whatever you want to be, right? Rags to riches. The idea that manifest destiny, you guys might remember from history of American history. The idea that, move west, claim land, build your life as you want it to be done. All this, and I can't help but think of Jesus, who never left a place the size of New Jersey. To make it more relevant to West Coast, right? The distance from San Diego to Malibu. The width of like from the ocean to San Bernardino. It's like that was Jesus' area. He never left beyond that. And we can't say that Jesus had no impact, right? Jesus has had the greatest impact on the world that we've ever seen. Paul even admits in Acts 16 that the Spirit kept him from going to a part of Asia that he had tried to go to, right? I bought into this impact to distance ratio myth, if you will. Hook, line, and sinker, right? After I didn't get to go to Africa, I worked at a summer camp that was down the street from my college with junior hires, right? What's less glamorous than working with junior hires? There's nothing. That's not true. There might be things. That after the summer was over, I got a job as the supervisor of a mailroom at an art institute. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever been to an art school, but art schools are tiny. They're almost all really small. And so the supervisor of the mailroom was not super exciting. The room was probably no bigger than your dorm room, maybe smaller. Stacks of paper everywhere, the copy machine, and this loud thing that folds papers. And I have my desk and no windows. It's in the middle of the building. I was kind of sitting there. Every once in a while I think, like, what in the world am I doing here? Like, what? I'm sitting in a room with no windows and just all by myself. Wow. I could smell, paper and weird chemicals. This doesn't seem very good. I think there is something that that I do want to address. It's important to say. This issue of sacrifice, right? Because God does call us to sacrifice. He does call us to give everything to him, our entire life. He uses the metaphor of the pearl of great value, right? Jesus says that this woman sold everything that she had to buy this pearl of great value. The man who sold everything he had to buy the field that had the treasure in it. He gave up everything, right? He's using this very intentionally to say it takes everything. He points out the widow who drops her copper coins, a great sacrifice for someone who's poor and down on their luck. I think it really manifests itself in the story of the rich young ruler. I mean, we've all heard this, right? Rich young ruler says, Jesus, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And he says, go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor and follow me. He can't do it. He walks away sad. The disciples are like, well, if the rich guy can't do it, then how in the world, how are we supposed to do this? Jesus says, with man, this is impossible. Well, they say, who then can be saved? With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Peter answered him, we've left everything to follow you. Sacrifice, we've given it all. What then will there be for us? Great, Peter. This is really catching the point, isn't he? Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Here we go. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. So how do we make sense of all this, right? Jesus calls us to give everything, to sacrifice, to give up our entire life. And there's this very real situation that, well, how do we then live our life, right? Do we all become missionaries? No. Paul makes it really clear. We all have different roles. We all have different functions. And even those who are weaker, we raise up, right? That we need diversity in the body, okay? Martin Luther is really helpful in this. And there's a lot to be said about this, so I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to move on to something else. But Martin Luther says that there's a general call, right, for all Christians. All Christians, we are called to live life a particular way. We're called to love God with our whole heart, soul, our whole mind, and our whole body. We're called to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, right? These are things that we are all called to do. But Martin Luther also says there's particular calls, right? We're all not called to the same thing in life. We are called to different things. For Paul, this meant traveling around that region of the world and preaching to Gentiles and Jews about the gospel of Jesus Christ. For Peter, he largely stayed in the Israel area, and he preached to the Jews as well. Some make the distinction between a providential call, the things that you can't change about your life, right? The family that you have, the parents, the siblings, the place that you were born, right? There's nothing you can do about that. That's actually might be called a calling, this thing that you've been given, this gift. And there's a circumstantial call, right? Right now, you're students. And as a student, you've been called to be faithful to your classes, to your homework assignments, to the other things that your degrees require of you. Maybe you're involved in, you've committed to something this year, maybe a club or a ministry, and they're asking something of you to be faithful in showing up, maybe preparing something in particular. But I want to take a look at Matthew 25, and again, many of you might be familiar with this. And I want you to, as I read this, I want you to just try to think, when else have I heard this? And in what context have people used this in? Okay? It's the parable of the talents. Jesus is talking and he says, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents of money, and another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5, said, Master, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, there's a famous line, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. He said, 'You entrusted me with 2 talents. I've gained 2 more.' Master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.' His master replied, 'You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put your money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one that has the 10. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him and throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" There's a lot in that parable, right? I want to focus on a few things. I think that part of what Jesus is sharing in this passage is his desire to have some return, right? That he's given us something, and he wants to see something in return for that, okay? So he's given us some measure of responsibility with what we've been given. Now, a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about what God gives us. Oftentimes when I've heard this in the past, it sounds like God has given you the message of Jesus, and you need to go share it with everyone possible, right? I think it's broader than that. I think what he's saying is he's given you everything you have. He's given you gifts and abilities. He's given you life, breath in your lungs, blood in your veins, right? And that all of that is a gift. And you have some measure of responsibility over what you've been given. God will not inhabit your body and do things for you. If he does, let me know, and we should talk about that. I would be interested to hear about that. We have some measure of responsibility, but that also means that we have some freedom, right? Part of having responsibility over something is to have freedom to use that how we can. I think we have a tendency to want to take sides in this conversation, right? That I know that I do. As I think through this, I think, well, yeah, I think traveling across the world and being a missionary in another country is pretty important. I wouldn't disparage that in any way because it's such an important part of my story. It is important, absolutely. And I think there might be some of us here who might say, being here is super important. Well, and the truth is that those things are both true. We need people to travel across the world and share the message of Jesus with people who haven't heard it before. And you know what? We need really good garbage collectors too. We need really good maintenance people. We need really good teachers and really good coaches. And you know what? There's bad doctors out there. Like, I'm sure some of you have had experiences with a bad doctor. We need good doctors, right? We need honest, faithful, and just lawyers and accountants. I think as I have been thinking about this and preparing for today, I kind of come back to, and every once in a while I'm reminded of that moment in history class when my teacher said, you know, it's not so much about the religious acts that we do, although those are important. It's about relationship, right? With God, no matter what we do, no matter what it is that you do, I think that God wants to do that with you more than he wants you to do something apart from him. That it is about actually having a relationship with the God who created the universe and has given us skills and gifts and abilities. So, what's next? I would encourage you, as you're thinking about what you're going to do this summer, as you're thinking about what you're going to do after you graduate, maybe your major is pushing you in a particular direction. Just be honest with God. How do you feel about what you're going to do, what you feel like what you have to do? Start there. Ask yourself, why do I want to do this? What do I desire to do? Are these things biblical? And most of all, I want to encourage you to seek wise input. Most of all. If you have a mentor, maybe a pastor that you're close with, talk to them. Tell them, look, I'm not sure about this thing that I'm doing. You know, maybe you're in spiritual direction. I think that that's an excellent place to take these questions. My prayer is that there are some of you in here that would go to the Democratic Republic of Congo at some point and teach and share the love of Christ with them. And I hope that some of you will go to Starbucks after you graduate for a small part of your time and just make really good coffee for people. And that somehow someone will go into Starbucks and say, wow, that was actually probably one of the best cups of coffee I've had at Starbucks. And that no matter what you do, that you can say, God, you're here. You're present with me, and this work matters.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.